Welcome to the Woodstock Theological Center's Reflection Series. This week's video podcast features a discussion about the upcoming Woodstock Forum, Are We Eating Ourselves to Death? Food, Ecology, and Consciousness, with Woodstock Senior Fellow Ilia Delio. The forum is being held on Wednesday, October 27, 2010, in Georgetown University's Hariri Building.
The title of your forum is called Food and Ecology, and so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you came up with that theme and why those two concepts together.
It's a good question. Well, ecology is the science or the study of relationships in nature, and we are ecological people. And food is an essential ingredient of being alive. And we know today we're in an ecological crisis on many different levels. We hear a lot of talk about global warming, and more we're realizing we have a broken food system. And by that, I think what we're learning is that, especially in North America, we have foods that are costing the earth. In other words, it's contributing to the global climate warming because of importing foods from around the world, and then importing foods sometimes at the expense of the poor. So we tend to, because we have excessive demands, in a sense we have a problem of distribution of food in the world that makes a more equitable and just system of food. So the forum is to not answer any questions or solve any problems. First of all, the problems are too immense to solve, but it is to raise the consciousness, our awareness of our participation in, first of all, the food system, and then you might say the problem of food and the ecological costs of our eating habits today.
And what is the significance of the forum being held or being hosted by Woodstock, which is a center for theological reflection? What is the importance of these issues?
Right. Woodstock, first of all, reflects on the human problems of today to raise our awareness, our consciousness of where we are and where we're going as human persons. And it has become increasingly aware that science plays such a significant part of our lives and our culture. We live in a scientific culture. So it has thrown its weight, so to speak, toward ecology because of where we find ourselves today with regard to the environment, and trying to understand, again, what it means to live with an ecological consciousness and what kind of transformation is needed today in the human person for a sustainable future. So the question of food and ecology is a ripe one for Woodstock that seeks a deeper understanding, you might say a deeper understanding of the problems, in this case the problem of food, for transformation of the human person.
You just mentioned the term ecological consciousness. Could you talk a little bit more about what that is?
I use that term to mean a consciousness or awareness of being part and parcel of a web of life. And while that may seem obvious to some, it is really not so obvious to a lot of people. And many people, whether or not we're conscious of it, we operate out of a specific framework. And in Western culture, in North American culture, we operate out of a Christian Western framework that is, for better or worse, and not to be overly simplistic, it's dualistic. It's heaven and earth and God and human. And this kind of dualistic thinking has been unhelpful on the whole to the deepening of our humanity and for a sustainable earth, because I think a lot of people feel, explicitly or implicitly, we're only here for a short time on this earth, so why do we have to bother about it? We're going on to some other world. And what we know from science today is, especially from the science of evolution, we come from the earth. The earth does not come from us. So, we owe, in a sense, the earth our lives. I mean, it is what sustains us. It's what gives birth to us. So, in a sense, the earth is primary and we're secondary. It's not that we're primary and the earth is secondary, and we have not operated out of that consciousness. So an ecological consciousness is a reorientation of our being in the world, as being part of a web of life. And so we don't have control or manipulation of that web. We participate in it. And that's what we're trying to understand better.
What role does different faith practices have in raising this type of consciousness?
I think religion is extremely important because, again, I think whether we admit it or not, being is religious by nature. Religion, when I mean that, I mean there's something more outside of ourselves that draws us into something other. So that's another conversation. But in terms of faith, and certainly from Christian faith, we believe that God is the author of this creation and the author of our lives. So that even with regard to food, there's nothing that says we have to have food. Just because we live doesn't mean that it has to, we have to have what we want to meet our needs. So from a faith perspective, we see everything as gift, including food. And that's why we pray before meals, because we pray, we acknowledge that God as creator, and therefore are thankful for the gifts of creation, which include the food that we eat. Again, I think religious practices such as fasting. Fasting both serves to heighten our awareness of our creatureliness, of our created being. Again, it heightens our awareness that our needs and our desires, help us to sift out our needs and our desires, so that we don't have, and the subtitle of this conference is, consciousness. Are we aware of our needs and our desires? Because we tend to eat unconsciously. We're hungry, we stuff our faces, so to speak, and we move on, having not a second thought or a further thought of where that food has come from, what the impact of that means for us, for the earth, etc. So faith links us and food to a larger whole, to a larger creation, to other people, and to the source of life, who is God.
I was wondering how this forum might address larger consumption issues in the U.S. that aren't limited to just our eating habits.
Right. Yeah. That's again a question. It's a question I had in mind when I conceived of the forum, because again I think the question, are we eating ourselves to death? Looking at our patterns of consumption. And I think food is, again, a basic staple of life, and the unconscious inhaling, you might say, or ingesting of food, to me, is played out in other avenues of our life. The unconscious inhaling of material things, like I have 2 computers, but I just feel that I need this extra one for whatever reason. And so we start accumulating stuff in our lives, and we wind up with stuffed up lives. Not really thinking about or really conscious of the impact of accumulating anything. It becomes a sort of a buffer system to, and that in itself, why do we accumulate stuff, period? If you go back to different, go back in the ages or go to different cultures, this is not part of, their thinking or their mentality. For the first 1,000 years, community was very important. So I think we're living in this age of individualism, isolationism, the inhalation of things, whether it's food or material things or even knowledge or power, whatever it is. We take it in and we build ourselves up, and we tend to isolate ourselves. And to me, that's the ecological problem, because we fragment the whole web of life. We build ourselves up over and against one another. And therefore, it's, to me, the source of injustice, because it becomes a me versus you type thing. So the problem of consciousness, which is where religion plays an important part, an awareness of being and the source of our being, an awareness of relationality, that we are not autonomous beings, that we are relational beings, and that we are related to one another and to the earth. An awareness, again, of needs and desires. What do we need to live a fulfilled life? Is it, having copious amounts of foods or copious amounts of things? So I do hope that this forum will just raise a consciousness of consumptive patterns, that are just permeating our culture and fragmenting it.
Thank you for tuning in to the Woodstock Reflections series. For more information, visit us online at woodstock.georgetown.edu.